What's up? Welcome in to a little video series that I am starting here, brought to you by the FanTC Podcast Network. Make sure to check us out on all social media. Subscribe to the podcast. This is probably going up on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe to the YouTube as well. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that kind of good stuff. Now, obviously, you can see with the screen below me, we got ourselves into another Underdog Best Ball Draft. The first one I did was on like a TikTok, Instagram Reel series. This one, I'm going to do a little bit of a longer form videos. I want to be able to explain my picks a little bit more, as well as kind of talk a little bit more about the draft, maybe show you guys where I think there's some value, where I think maybe you can hold off on a guy, stuff like that. So we're going to jump in, picks 1 through 24. I'm going to try and keep it around, 10 minutes long so these videos don't get too long. But let's go ahead and dive in real quick and take a look at this draft. So with the first overall pick, this guy happened to take Jamar Chase, which I don't necessarily hate that because I do think Jamar Chase is as good as any wide receiver in the NFL, and I think he may have the best quarterback wide receiver duo in the NFL right now with Joe Burrow. So if you want to take Jamar Chase, I understand it. Personally, I think I'm taking Justin Jefferson almost every time if I have that 101 pick, but in these, best ball matchups, if you can get a Jamar Chase and tie him to with Joe Burrow on that 2-3 turn, you're going to be taking Burrow a little early there. But if you do it like I did in my first one, I understand taking Chase early. Now, if you take Chase early and you don't stack him with Burrow, a kind of questionable decision making, in my opinion. There, I would much rather have, you know, the stack as opposed to just drafting Chase 101 and then grabbing other quarterbacks later. And actually, he may have already made the pick for Joe Burrow. Looks like, oh nope, he's still there. So I think he's already made his second round and third round pick. So in that situation, I don't necessarily love it. I think I'm just going to take the guy that's proven it over a couple of years. I know Chase has as well, but I just think Jordan Addison's going to be a rookie. There's always a little bit of a an adaptation to the NFL that you have to have. Where I think Justin Jefferson is just going to completely dominate for at least the first half. Maybe Addison gets a little bit more involved down the stretch, but I still think Jefferson's the clear 101. With the second pick, I don't hate McCaffrey going number 2, except for Justin Jefferson was still on the table. And why I hate that is this is a 3 wide receiver format, so you're going to have 3 wide receivers scored each week. I would much rather have Justin Jefferson than Christian McCaffrey. CMC is still amazing. He's going to be great for the 49ers. But again, with 3 wide receivers, counting score, Jefferson's almost a locked and loaded guy every single week. So I don't mind it. I think I'm going Jefferson, CMC, Chase would be my preferred first 3 picks. But, shout out to this guy. Getting Jefferson to fall to him at number 3, that is pretty sweet. Number 4, Tyreek Hill. Don't mind this at all. I think Tyreek Hill is absolutely amazing. Um, only thing here is I think I'm maybe taking Cooper Kupp over Tyreek Hill. Cooper Kupp actually averaged the most points per game at the wide receiver position with, I think, at least 12 games played, maybe 11. Can't remember exactly how many he had played before getting hurt. So with that being said, I still think I kind of like Kupp a little bit more. Also, the Rams offense really doesn't have a clear wide receiver two, doesn't have an elite level tight end, really doesn't have an elite running back unless you're considering Cam Akers that. So I think Cooper Kupp is still the elite offensive weapon. I mean, I think you could still make a case for Cooper Kupp over Jamar Chase if you wanted to at the 1.3, and I'd be willing to listen to it. So I think Kupp I like a little more than Hill, but I do think Hill provides, that ultimate upside at any given week. So I don't hate that as well. Travis Kelsey went at the 1.5, and I would not, I don't hate this because now your tight end position is locked up. But I was doing a little bit of research on tight ends, and Jason from the Fantasy Footballers actually kind of pointed this out. But last year was a really big disparity. You had Travis Kelsey up here, and there was really no tight end two of note. Like he lapped the field. In previous years, it's usually 2, 3, even sometimes 4 guys that are kind of in that upper echelon. Maybe one a little higher than the rest, but usually there's 2 to 3 other valuable guys and then the clear drop off. Whereas last year was kind of an outlier. So I think Kelsey's value is going to be extremely high going into this year. And I don't, again, if you want to wrap up the tight end position, I don't mind it. My personal preference is going to be wait on the tight end. If Mark Andrews falls in the 3rd round, I love him right there because you get 2 elite level players and then you add your tight end. Whereas now you have Travis Kelsey. Let's see. He has Travis Kelsey and Devontae Smith, which isn't bad, but he could have Cooper Cup, another really good player, and then maybe have added Mark Andrews in the third, which in my honest opinion, I like a little bit more this year. Again, I don't see as big of a gap in tight ends this year as we saw last year. There's still going to be, but there's most likely going to be 3 to 4 guys who are in that upper echelon as opposed to just one in Kelsey like last year. I already said enough about Cooper Cup. I think he is as good as anybody. The only question there is, can Matthew Stafford's elbow stay good? As long as it does, I think Cooper Cup can see himself being, top 2 fantasy wide receivers again this year. AJ Brown at the 1.7 I thought was a little bit interesting here. I don't mind taking AJ Brown that early. My only problem is Philadelphia is so loaded. And I know he's so good, but you got, Devontae Smith was taken by this guy in the second round. You got another second round wide receiver. Dallas Goedert's going to be one of those tight ends that's going to be looked at as someone who could potentially have a really good year. You obviously added DeAndre Swift, a pass catching running back. It's just, when you add all these factors together, not that I don't think AJ Brown's going to be great. I think he will be. I just would rather him be at the 1-2 turn as opposed to being a middle of the first round pick. So don't mind it. I just think he's kind of fighting an uphill battle from here. And he went AJ Brown, Chris Olave. So you're really banking on AJ Brown basically repeating what he did last year because I don't know if there's another level he can get to in that offense. And you're really hoping Chris Olave breaks out under Derek Carr. So a little bit iffy from my perspective, but again, if AJ Brown repeats and Chris Olave gets 10% better, I think this guy's going to be pretty happy with those 2 picks. You may need Olave to get about 25% better, actually. He fell off pretty hard at the end of last year. And then we had a little strain of running backs come in. Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, Nick Chubb. Now, Eckler, Robinson, I do not mind. They're both pass-catching running backs. This is 0.5 points per PPR. I don't know why I said it so weird like that, but Eckler, I love. Honestly, when I saw the draft going the way that it did, I was hoping he would fall to 111, although he almost never does. I was really hoping he would. Bijan, I don't mind if you want to take the shot on Bijan. Let's see. Yeah, this guy got Bijan, Devontae Adams. I love that. Obviously, you'll see here Devontae Adams fell a little bit. I'm not going to. I'll get into him when I get into the second round. Bijan, you're banking on him getting the full workload, which he absolutely should. Now, I just my only question there is Atlanta, who's really not primed to be a contender, do they want to start putting insane wear and tear on Bijan Robinson right away, or do they maybe want to split it up just a little bit so that way, in 2 to 3 years, or maybe even 4 to 5, we're not having a Zeke level fall off because he had 200 plus rushes for his entire career. And now you also have guys like Derrick Henry, who Derrick Henry was more kind of the backup running back, which Bijan won't be, but he split carries with DeMarco Murray and kind of worked his way in. And it seems like he's had a longer, more successful running back career, and I feel like a lot of teams should maybe look at that. Now, again, Derrick Henry is also an outlier, but I think a lot of people think Bijan is as well. So I don't mind it. It is a little bit risky, especially when you have other known commodities out there on the board. But if he hits, he could be an absolute home run this year. Nick Chubb at the 1.10 kind of threw me off for a second, but then I remember they don't really have a secondary running back as good as Kareem Hunt was, although last year they didn't use him like he was, and Nick Chubb absolutely dominated. Now, your concern is Nick Chubb really fell off once Deshaun Watson came back, and really the whole offense did, so it's a little bit questionable. Hopefully, it was more of just circumstance as opposed to Deshaun Watson being the reason why the running game fell apart, but we will see how they start off this season. I still think Nick Chubb can be someone who's really, really good. We just need to kind of see it happen again. Not again. He was really good. I just want to see him kind of repeat the early form of last year because he really struggled down the stretch. And then we got to my first pick, and I went ahead. I think I reached a little bit but when you're on these turns, you got to just grab the guys that you want. So I took Garrett Wilson, wide receiver for the New York Jets. I think he honestly could have an absolutely insane year this year with Aaron Rodgers. When these old quarterbacks go to new teams, we saw Peyton when he went to Denver, initially Tom when he goes to Tampa Bay. They're reinvigorated. It's a new system. It's new. Everything's going well. I expect Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson to have an insane year this year. While I don't think it's going to lead to the playoff success that they're necessarily looking for, I still think for fantasy, Garrett Wilson he could end up as the wide receiver one. And when I'm looking at these other names here, I want to find a guy that I think can get the. I want to look, and then I'm looking at other positions. I want to look at who can potentially be the number one at their position. And for me, that was Garrett Wilson. Now, this was the 1-2 turn right here where we saw Stephon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb go back to back. I don't mind this at all. I think Stephon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb are a great pair. I mean, this guy's got his wide receivers, really locked up. Now we'll see what he adds on later in the draft. Only question mark with Diggs and why I passed up on him was if Hopkins goes there, we're going to see some touchdowns kind of get split up and it could be kind of odd. And then CeeDee Lamb, I think, is a great pick. I would have taken CD at my next pick if he wouldn't have snagged him. So I think CD's great. My only issue with CD is he has Dak Prescott. Garrett Wilson has Aaron Rodgers. I think Garrett Wilson could finish as the number one, where CD, I would say top 5 is in his range, but I don't see him being the number one fantasy wide receiver. And then we go to my second round pick, which was Amon-Ra St. Brown, which is a little bit iffy, and it kind of took me a little bit of time to really think this one through when I was making that decision. But I wanted to grab another wide receiver, although we had running backs like Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley still on the board. Both of those guys have some question marks. Stevenson went next, that was kind of a reach, but we'll get into that. But let's look at these wide receivers that I passed up on. Davante Adams, again, I think he's probably the best wide receiver in the NFL when you're just looking at pure wide receivers. But, is it going to be Jimmy G throwing him the football? Is it going to be a rookie? Is it going to be someone else they have to pick up at this point? I have no idea. So with that being said, in drafting this far ahead of time, I went ahead and went with the more known commodity in Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's, again, going to have 6 weeks without any real wide receiver 2, with Williams being suspended. So I think that he could absolutely go nuclear again. He's been really good for fantasy for the past 2 years. I think he continues that, tear that he has been on. And, when I'm looking at, quarterback situations, I think Jared Goff's better than Jimmy G. I honestly think Jared Goff's better than Tua Tagovailoa, and I think Jared Goff's better than Derek Carr as well. So when I'm looking at potentially maybe adding a quarterback down the road with Amon-Ra St. Brown, I can wait an extra, compared to Tua, but I can wait later in the draft and grab Jared Goff if I did want to stack him with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Whereas Tua, you got to reach on him a little bit. And, the second wide receiver going off the board for a team, and we're not even halfway through the second. I know they proved it last year, but Jalen Waddle actually kind of fell off a little bit last year when Tua was hurt or out. So I think Tyreek Hill is quarterback proof. I don't necessarily think the same about Jalen Waddle, so I could not take him over Amon-Ra St. Brown. All right, so those are my first 2 picks. So this is how I'm starting off my draft. Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. We'll see who falls to us at that 3-4 turn and see what we add then. But let's go through the rest of these round 2 picks. Stevenson at basically the 2.3, and he had Nick Chubb, Ramondre Stevenson. So this guy's going running back heavy. I don't mind it, but you just have to nail your wide receivers later in the draft. Again, 3 wide receivers are counted for in this format. So, hopefully if Chubb and Stevenson don't get hurt and they do what they're projected to do this year, your running backs are absolutely locked up. Your only issue is, I just think going 2 running backs early in this format is very risky, especially if one ends up with an injury or if one has a lackluster season. Now, Stevenson in New England should be insane, and there's a lot of fantasy people projecting him to be insane this year. So if that is the case, then this could be, a Chubb-Stevenson pairing could be an elite pairing. So let's get into these 3 wide receivers here. Adams, Waddle, Olave. I think getting Adams here, pairing him up with Bijan, I think is great. I think he's still going to be great. Again, my only concern is we just have no idea who the quarterback is right now. And, 3 months from now when the NFL's starting up and Jimmy G's there and he's connecting with Adams and they're scoring touchdowns, I'm going to be like, man, I should have grabbed him. But, as we sit right now, again, there's a chance they have either a 4th or 6th round rookie. I can't remember when he got drafted, starting week 1 because of Jimmy G's physical issues. So, with that being the case, I could not take myself to grab Davante Adams, but I would be honest, if I was drafting in the middle and I was here at 2.4 and he fell to me, I feel like that's an absolute steal for Davante Adams. So a little bit going back and forth on him there, but he's really good. It's just the quarterback concern gets me. Jalen Waddle, I highlighted a little bit of the concern. Tua, if he can stay healthy, I think Jalen Waddle goes nuclear again, like he was at the beginning part of last year. But once we saw Tua get hurt, Jalen Waddle's targets came down, his yards per reception came down, basically every stat across the board came down. So if Tua's in there, I love Waddle. If Tua's not in there, Waddle is playable, but you have to downgrade him, especially if they don't have a higher level backup, which they may have got Jacoby Brissett, which I'm a little bit more happy with, as opposed to an injured Bridgewater and Skylar Thompson. But they also got Mike White. Maybe they don't have Jacoby. I can't remember exactly. Oh, Jacoby's in Washington, actually, if I remember correctly. So either way, it's just if they go to the backup, I feel like Waddle's value really falls down. And Chris Olave, I don't mind this Chris Olave pick. I think that with Derek Carr, he could potentially have a much better season, but I do think he will have a better season than he had last year. I just don't see him having a massive breakout season like I'm expecting out of a Garrett Wilson, or like we saw out of Jalen Waddle at the beginning of last year. I think Chris Olave is really really good. I think he could fit well with Derek Carr. It's just you know look at the people Derek Carr have made fantasy relevant. Amari Cooper, is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, whether you want to give him his flowers or not. Devontae Adams last year, the best wide receiver in the NFL, when you're looking at route running and wide receiver characteristics. Darren Waller, when he had his amazing year, Darren Waller's a freakish tight end, although we haven't seen it in a few years. So if you're not an elite level player, Derek Carr does not elevate you, and that's my concern with Olave. I think he's really good. I think he could really show out this year, but I wanted to see a little bit more from. Not, I didn't want to see more from Olave. I don't know how Derek Carr is going to elevate him because I think Derek Carr is about as average as the day is long. Also, I realize when I'm doing these long form videos, it is much tougher to to just nail down your thoughts because you kind of just have other thoughts popping in the back of your head while you're talking. But let's go ahead and wrap up these last few picks. So we got Jonathan Taylor. I do not mind this. He was actually the guy that I was considering. Actually, a couple of these wide receiver running backs were, as opposed to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think when you're getting down here, especially here where you're going to be able to flip it around real quick and grab another player pretty quickly, I love go ahead and grab one of these elite running backs. I mean, Taylor, again, we'll see. I think Indiana's going to struggle a little bit on offense, but he does have a chance to be elite. Saquon has a chance to be elite. My only question is, I don't think he would sit out, but if he's traded to the Bears, I don't love him as much as if he stays on the Giants and he's the focal point of their offense. So, and the Bears have for some reason been like a team rumored to be trying to make a trade for Saquon. I don't think the Giants are getting rid of him necessarily. I just think that there is a chance that he gets moved, and that chance right now is enough for me to take St. Brown, who I know is locked into his spot. Tony Pollard, I mean, I love Tony Pollard. Unfortunately, where I was at in this draft, I knew I was going to have to reach on him at the beginning of the second if I wanted him. But again, I wanted that two wide receivers. I think when you can get two elite wide receivers to start one of these drafts, I think it puts you in a better position going forward throughout the draft. There's so many injuries at the running back position that, a Jonathan Taylor, a Saquon, a Pollard, Henry, Brees Hall, all these guys. Like Brees Hall, he's going right here at the 212. That last year, if he would have finished out the season, he's probably an early first round pick, but he got injured. He's coming off that injury. If any running back gets injured, it just plummets your team. So when I have chances to get elite level wide receiver talent, I'm going to take that. Obviously, wide receivers get hurt too. It just seems like more season-ending injuries happen to running backs as opposed to wide receivers. I might be wrong on that. I don't have statistics. That's just a kind of a feel. Or I would say elite level players, like elite level running backs. I feel like you're always hearing of someone going down. Whereas elite level wide receivers, it seems like they're always, for some reason, just a couple week injury as opposed to season ending. Could be completely wrong with that. That's just my opinion on how I'm thinking today. So Saquon, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Brees Hall, I don't have a problem with any of these. Derrick Henry actually fell to the end of the third round in my last draft, so it's good to see him kind of get the respect back here. I know there were some talks about him getting traded while I was doing my last draft, so maybe now that those have settled down, his value has returned. And the only other guy is Devontae Smith here. I understand why Devontae Smith is going this high. He's amazing. He honestly ruined my chances at making it to the championship game in 2 of my fantasy football leagues last year because he went nuclear against the Cowboys, I believe, on Christmas Eve. So, yeah, I mean, I don't mind drafting him. My only problem is on a week to week basis. Again, that Philadelphia offense is going to have a lot of mouths to feed, and we will just see if they're able to really duplicate everything that they did last year. But that's going to wrap up, again, rounds 1 and 2 of my Underdog basketball draft. Again, like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you go subscribe to the podcast as well. Appreciate the support. Peace out.